In fact, despite the last 3 winters or so, we still have yet to break the minus 15 degree Fahrenheit. We came awful close a couple times this year, but we almost very seldom have days below 15 below Fahrenheit any longer. Pretty dramatic change in the record. The models get this right. They don't necessarily get this right. We've also seen a very clear trend in declining number of days over 100. And you may remember when you were little, a lot more really hot days, or seemingly so. It's true. We almost never have a day over 100 any longer. In fact, we don't even have many days over 90 anymore. The models don't necessarily get this right. In fact, they generally miss it. I think it has to do, again, with how much moisture there is in the air and how much more difficult it is to heat a wet volume of air compared to a dry. If it's dry, it's much easier. It takes less energy to warm that. This is really sensitive, Sarah. I can't look at it. Back to the precipitation. This is a famous picture from the wire service on AP, I think it was, in June of 2008 in Waterloo. And look at the look on these fellows' faces as the river rose to all-time record levels in both Waterloo and later on in Cedar Rapids. In fact, the Cedar River at Waterloo, the top part is the precipitation. We had kind of a wet fall to begin with. So this is 2 inches of precip right here. And you can see in about 10 days preceding the flood of 2008 in Waterloo, we had about 14 inches of rain. And the worst part for Cedar Rapids, as you may know, was that just as the peak of the hydrograph was coming down the Cedar River, about 3 more inches right on top of it at just the worst possible time. It truly was a remarkable event. And it left Cedar Rapids looking like this, as you remember. Total damages, what were the final total damages? 700 million, something like that?
No, you're low.
That's too low.
They generally say somewhere between 4 to 6 billion, and it depends on how you try to count it. That's
wow.
Statewide is 8 to 10 billion.
I'm going to show some slides that differ with that, but I'm sure there are some differences of opinion. These are from the report. I'm just using the slides from the report. Of course, one of the big, the $64,000 question, I guess, is could these type of floods experienced by Waterloo and by Cedar Rapids have been prevented if we had a more natural land cover, land use? And there are a lot of people working on that question, but I think the answer so far is that yes and no. The peaks of the hydrographs, the worst part of the storm, could be shaved off if we hadn't drained all our wetlands, cleared all our prairies, and cut down our riparian forests. And also moderate floods probably could be avoided entirely. But keep in mind that what we're witnessing here is both a change in land use and a pretty dramatic change in climate over the same 100-year time period. The two together are kind of deadly. And so could we have avoided that remarkable storm that I just showed you that came in 2008 on the Cedar River? I doubt it. Could we have shaved maybe some of it off? Quite likely. Could we prevent milder floods from occurring if we restored some wetlands, put some deep-rooted prairie grasses back in, slowed the water down, kept it in the, up in the watershed? I think so. Maybe it's not a clear-cut answer, but I think that's the truth. One of the concerns, and mentioned in the report quite prominently, is soil loss. When you have these kind of events, especially, not only, I haven't mentioned it, but not only has our amount of precipitation and the intensity changed in Iowa, but the pattern has changed some too. It's moved more into the spring and summer months, less into the fall and winter. And so we're getting a lot of rainfall at a time before crops and other vegetation has canopied. This is the soil erosion from 2008 alone. It's calculated, it's not measured. Bob Libra may know this is from our Iowa soil erosion model, which is a very interesting website. It's actually supported by Purdue University now, but originally developed at Iowa State. And the calculations from this model indicate that we sustained in the red and orange colors 40 and 50 tons of soil loss in that 1 year. And generally we say that no more than 5 tons per acre of soil loss is acceptable or sustainable. So pretty significant loss of soil as a natural resource just in 1 year. And more of that will occur despite the fact we're doing more conservation tillage and more no-till. We're losing it still on account of the change in climate. Along with the soil runs off more nutrients. I have a student, we have a paper just about to come out on the role of the 2008 flood in Gulf hypoxia. Iowa lost about $1 billion in fertilizer as a result of just the 2008 flood. And you can see that we're at the epicenter of the nutrient loss nationwide for both nitrogen on the left and phosphorus on the right. And the exhaust pipe goes down to the Gulf of Mexico, so you can imagine the folks in the coastal areas are very mad at us and would like to stop this runoff of nutrients and Gulf hypoxia. These are the figures from Dave Swenson at Iowa State, Rob, that are in our report. And it sums to about $3 billion in losses, about $1 billion for ag and $1.3 billion for, and that's mostly Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, I believe, in 2008, and the other weather-related losses. One of the issues in the report is that it's not talked about too much, but there's health effects associated with this. We have an epidemic of childhood asthma in this country, in Iowa also. It's not clear whether it's more detection, but probably it's a real effect. And we have a great increase due to the increase in moisture in the air, a great increase in allergens, pollen, and mold spores, which cause respiratory problems. Certainly, if you've got to clean up a home like this one, this is a Cedar Rapids home, you're gonna, and you've got a respiratory illness, you're in trouble. And we had a lot of people getting sick as a result of getting back into their homes in recent years, 2008 and 2010 in Iowa. That's above and beyond just the average increase in pollen and allergens and mold as a result of the increase in humidity and water vapor. Laura Jackson at the University of Northern Iowa reminded us that it affects species too, and this happens to be our poster child for species effect of climate change in Iowa. It's the wooded nesting turtle, wood turtle, and it's in central Iowa. It lays its eggs out in the middle of a sandbar in the middle of summer. And of course, we're getting big events in June and July now, and that's causes their eggs to, they do that to avoid predators, but ironically, the worst predator, humans, is the one changing the climate and washing the eggs away. So first, the recommendations from the Climate Change Committee, there were 7 or 8. I think they're common sense, but they bear repeating. The first one is that obviously we have to begin to, the report is mostly about adaptation, about that we're living with climate change. It's already here, folks. You better try to adapt to it. One aspect of adapting is plan that things will flood, make your buildings floodable like the Beckwith rowing center here. Harden the infrastructure, all of the low-lying capacitors and transformers for the wells, which you want to keep going in your water plants so you don't lose the water plant. Everything has to be raised up. Everything is in the lowest lying point right now. I'm pleased to say that both Iowa City and Cedar Rapids have plans to do much of that. In Iowa City, we have a $133 million flood plan since 2008, and we're 80-some million dollars of the way in completing it. Much of it has to do with hardening infrastructure, raising roads, raising bridges. The bridge, the Park Avenue Bridge, will likely be located somewhere to the north, very close to where it once was in early settlement times. Protect Iowa's soil, water quality, and ag productivity. This is because we're losing all our soil, as I mentioned to you, and we know how to avoid that with riparian zone plantations, terracing, allowing our streams to meander, slowing them down, and so on. Investing in wildlife habitat, because you may know that bird populations are down quite a bit from all this precipitation, and also because of the commodity crop prices right now, there's an awful lot of pressure to decrease grasslands and go towards row crops. One of the more interesting recommendations I thought was that the Iowa Department of Public Health should be reporting the health effects issue isn't on the radar screen of anybody, I don't think. And so one recommendation was that the Iowa Department of Public Health should make an annual report on allergies, asthma, emphysema, and so forth, and to look at the trends and to try to attribute causes to the extent that they can. Another one is that while we can't change federal highway standards, design standards, in order to harden them against flooding and severe storms, we can at least advocate for it. And that's one of the recommendations. And lastly, the Iowa Insurance Division is all over this. They know everything we've talked about. They're quite on top of the risks associated with climate change. We just would like them to report back to us, what kind of products are you developing, and how and why, how can we insure ourselves against these kind of events in the future. So to summarize, the climate is already changing. We are living with climate change, whether we want to admit it or not. Some people are already changing their behavior, as a matter of fact. We need to adapt. That's what this report was really about, in part because the State House really doesn't want to talk too much about mitigation, to be perfectly honest. But we have to join the rest of the world eventually, somehow, in lowering those emissions that we looked at earlier, so-called mitigation. That's the hardest part of all. And in the absence of mitigation, you can expect the next 100 years to be much, much warmer, but more importantly, have much more extremes. The average is thought to be about 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer in the next 100 years. Remember, we've only had 1 degree Fahrenheit so far. So this puts us into the realm of glacial periods. You know, a 6 to 8 degree Fahrenheit change is on the order of the type of temperature change that moves us out of a glaciated period, of an ice age. And so these are really big changes to occur in just 100 years. One might expect greater storm intensities, more severe droughts, and floods. Thanks very much.